Hi, I'm Erik Hall. I'm the digital sports editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and I'm joined by Tommy Deas, who is the APSE president in 2016, 2017, and he's currently the SEC cross-team leader for USA Today Sports Network and the Alabama sports editor. Hi, Tommy.
Hey Eric, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. So, looking to talk to you about your term as APSE president. But first, how did you get involved with APSE?
Okay, so when I got promoted to sports editor, I think it was in 2008 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, at the Tuscaloosa News. One of the first things that happened was I got a call from Phil Kaplan, who was at that time president of APSE, and I knew Phil a little, but I didn't know him well. And he's, hey, you should join. You should come to the Southeast Region meeting that's coming up. And that year it was in Atlanta, and it actually happened that I was in Atlanta at that time, but I couldn't go because I was there to attend a wedding of Gentry Estes, who I later hired as a columnist at the Tennessean. So I had known Gentry for quite a while. We'd never worked together at that point, but so anyway, that was kind of the thing. But Tuscaloosa had been a member of of APSE for a number of years previously. I won a few awards as a writer and everything. So there was certainly the intention that Tuscaloosa would stay involved and at least certainly participate in the contest. But I think I became more involved because Phil, again, I guess he was my benefactor. He at that time, and I think still, there were scholarships available to APSE judging, and it was only for first-time sports editors that they would try to get them involved in the organization and be a part of that and see how things worked. And so I was the fortunate recipient of one of those, and went to Orlando as a judge for APSC judging winter conference, and turned out we did really well that year. That was the reflecting the first year of work kind of under my leadership at the Tuscaloosa News, and won a Grand Slam. As a matter of fact, they didn't call it a Grand Slam yet because they just added digital as a category that year. And I remember telling Phil, well, they've got triple crowns. You want a triple crown? I said, no, we want a Grand Slam. He said, we don't have that. And I said, you do now. And it, it kind of stuck. I guess I will take credit for coining the Grand Slam as a winning four major categories at that time was Sunday, daily, special sections, all print plus digital. So anyway, the summer conference that year was in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I remember Michael Anastasi, who was president by the time judging started, that he stood. Maybe he wasn't president yet. I'm trying to remember. He might have been second vice president at that time, but he stood at the podium and invited everybody to come to Salt Lake for the APSE conference, summer conference. And he said, "Look, I know there are some of you that's not the cheapest place in the world to get to by flight." And some of you are on your own dimes, and some of you only get so much paid for. But I will pledge right now that if I will help you any way I can, and that includes the airport's not like right near where the hotel is. If you ask me, I will personally come pick you up at the airport if you come. And I bet he thought nobody was going to take him up on that, but he was wrong because I went back and we had won a bunch of awards, including the Grand Slam. And I went to my publisher at the time, Tim Thompson in Tuscaloosa. And I said, Tim, would you send me to Salt Lake? And I had already looked and seen what it would cost. And he said, I will pay for the flight. Everything else is on you. And I ended up getting a roommate so I could subsidize, only pay for half the stay that way. But Tuscaloosa was a small shop. I was very grateful that he was paying for my flight, because I want to say the flight was like $1,200. That was not a cheap flight at all. And I called Michael Anastasi and I said, Michael, I don't know if you remember me from judging, but I'm about to find out if you're a man of your word, because I'm about to book a flight to Salt Lake City, and that's all that my paper is paying for. So I do need a ride. And Michael said, as soon as you book it, call me and tell me what time you're landing, what time you're scheduled to land, and I will be there. And darned if he wasn't. And he gave me and Larry Graham both rides that year. And Larry's become one of my better friends and that I've met through this industry. I talk to Larry quite often. So I remember being in a car with Larry and Michael, and he kind of gave us a little ride around tour of the city. Not like we didn't take 2 or 3 hours to see all the sights, but he would point out things and say, this is over here and the tabernacle's over there, and blah blah blah. So that was kind of my introduction to APSE.
That's really cool. How did you then start to move into leadership with your organization?
It wasn't long after that. I think it was maybe in 2010-ish, 11. I don't know. I ended up, some people asked me, that in this organization, I think has always been welcoming of newcomers, and said, hey, the Southeast region is going to need a vice chair. The structure of our organization is we have regions, geographic regions, and each has a chair and a vice chair, and whoever's vice chair ascends to become chairman of that region or chairperson of that region, which involves, putting together region meetings and some other things like that. So I was asked if I'd be interested, and I said, sure. So I ran and I won. And before I completed my term as Southeast chair, I ended up running for third vice president. And again, to explain the structure of our organization, third vice president was a position that was created at some point, was in the bylaws, does not ascend to the presidency unless elected, but it is to represent smaller news organizations. What at the time, I'm sure when it started, would have been small newspapers. So that they wanted to make sure, in the wisdom of the group as it existed early on, that it wasn't just, this wasn't just all the big boys, so to speak, and big girls to, this wasn't just the New York Times and Washington Post and USA Today and Los Angeles Times and Chicago Tribune. This was an organization for all sports news outlets, and Tuscaloosa News had a place just like the New York Times did, and they wanted to make sure that was reflected in the leadership. So third vice president's a 2-year term, and I ran against 2 of my very good friends in the organization, John Bednarowski and Robert Gagliardi. And when I was at APSE judging and I got nominated and I accepted that nomination, I turned around the next morning and wrote on we wear name tags around your neck, and I wrote "Vote for Gagliardi" on mine, which I guess was a good election ploy because it won. I won, he didn't. So I got elected third vice president to the 2-year term to represent the smaller news organizations. And I guess probably the one thing I've never done in APSE, ironically, is I never completed a region chairship, because when I got nominated, my time had not run out on that yet. I think I was just ascended to the chair of that. So I guess there's one thing left for me to do, but I don't think I want to do it. But no, I believe in the spirit of rotation and the principle of new blood, and bringing new people with new ideas. And so anyway, the structure again of our organization is this: if you are third vice president and complete your term, which I fortunately did, you're automatically nominated to run for second vice president, which does ascend second, first, and then president. And I won. So I was the first third vice president ever elected to ascend to presidency in APSE, which I'm very proud of. And I remember Joe Sullivan of the Boston Globe, one of those big news organizations I mentioned, and it sounded like an endorsement, but I think he might have been the one who nominated me or formalized the nomination. I was already nominated, but he basically said, this organization has never had somebody from a small news organization to be its president. And I think it's about time, because there are more small news organizations that are members and just that exist than there are large. And APSE, I think, proved to me, and me ascending, and others have done it since, including my friend John Bednarowski, to follow the same path. And at that time, the Tuscaloosa News, I was from the smallest news organization that had ever been elected president, likewise. So it is not just a large news organization. Our association is not just that. It is literally to represent everyone from the smallest to the largest. One-person websites are members. If you do real journalism, you should be in this organization. If you do real sports journalism, and reap the rewards and contribute to it as well. But that's kind of my story of how I ended up being president.
That's fascinating.
I was the first person who spent 5 years in the leadership, and also 5 years that I'll never get back in the contest room, because I got drafted when I was a third vice president in the contest room, almost immediately, which means you're helping run the contest, and that is a chore. It's a rewarding chore, but boy, it's a chore.
I didn't realize you were the first person that ascended from third vice president to second vice president. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that, and I'm not so proud of it for personal pride. I'm proud of the organization, because again, there have been others since, that you can work for the Athletic, you can work for USA Today, you can work for the New York Times, you can work for the Tuscaloosa News or the Marietta Daily Journal, and you can be president of APSE. And I remember Gerry Ahern, who was running the contest, I think the year I was first there as a judge, and he took me aside. And the contest is a wonderful thing. It's one of the best things we do. It's the Heisman Trophy of sports journalism contest. If you get recognized in the APSE sports journalism contest, you've done good work, because I know how it's judged, and I know how seriously it's judged. But Gerry D. Ahern, now a past president, talked to me, and I forget who else it was. It was another scholarship judge, but we're so we're in you're in a judging room with, maybe in my case, 3 other judges, and they're all from large. One of them's from USA Today, and Reed Lamance is with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch at that time. Went on to Houston. I forget who the other one was, and we were just kind of, so when you're the first time judge, and you're from a small news organization, you're in with these, quote, big boy news organization reps, sports editors. You feel like you're the junior member, right? And you're just following along. And Gary's on the first night there said, "Want you to know," and I think it was me and another scholarship judge, a first time judge, said, "One thing when you go in there and you're in your room and you're judging this week, to remember is you earned your seat here, and your voice matters as much as anyone else's voice. So if you think so, if you see a story that you think should be in the top 10 and they don't, you need to advocate for it and tell them why it's in the top 10. And we literally had a situation, and we were judging breaking news, and there were these 2 stories, on the same topic. That it was some national topic. We were judging. I can't remember what it was. It may have been the steroid scandals at that time in baseball. And the other judges liked story A, and I liked story B better. And it came down to it, and I pointed it out. I said, "You need to read both of them again, because story B literally contradicts and has a person speaking on the record saying that what story A reported was wrong, that some facet of it was, 1 or 2 of the details that had been reported earlier. They're referring to the other report, and they disputed it. So I got listened to, and they said, well, let's re-vote on this. And the one I advocated for got in the top 10. Sorry to the other one. I don't remember who what they were, but that told me a lot about, it wasn't, the New York Times didn't have a veto on your vote, so to speak. just because they were the New York Times. And I use them because they're one of the most respected news organizations in the world. But you, me, or anybody else in a judging room were equals. And you've been in those rooms and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So in 2016-17, you became president. What are some things you achieved during your time as president that you're most proud of?
There are several. First of all, I think the thing I ran on and the thing that our organization needed the most was a membership drive. We were seeing dwindling circulations. We were seeing organizations drop out of news organizations that had been a part and no longer were, and we weren't getting as many new ones to join. And for a year, the best advice I got, and I passed it on to every president since, solicited or not, was from Gerry Ahern, who has preceded me about a term or two as president. And he said, the way to do this is start your day an hour or two earlier than you get up early. That means if you normally get up at 8, get up at 6 and spend that first couple of hours on APSE stuff, because you know how our jobs are. And if you don't do that, you're going to get involved in your day doing your regular job that you get paid to do, and you're never going to get back to what you wanted to do for APSE that day. And I literally did that for a year. And I mean, every day, maybe not Christmas, but every day more or less. And like, I would get up and I would email like news organizations. I mean, I was searching every database there was to find every, I had a list of what were members and what were past members that hadn't renewed, but I didn't sit there and wait until it was renewal time. I started at the beginning of my term and just said, here's why you should join APSE. It was a very proactive, and then I started calling them. And, after I emailed, some of them responded, most of them didn't. Then I started calling, leaving messages. Some of them I called 5 or 6 times, and many of them joined. And I just advocated for APSE and told what the benefits were and what it had done for me and why they should be a part. So we grew our membership at a time when our industry wasn't growing, and we grew it fairly dramatically. We also, under my leadership, and this was a controversial and contentious vote, big debate. At that time, we had a digital, one of the facets of our contest was the digital, by which means we're judging your website, right? Just like we judge your print sections. But the web-only news organizations could not enter their websites to be judged in the digital, which I thought was wrong. So ESPN.com or some tiny little website, I think there was a MinnesotaHockey.com at that time, they could not enter and have themselves judged against the other websites. And of course, they couldn't enter sections either because they didn't have print elements. And I advocated for that. And I lobbied for that. And I literally went to every member who was live at I think we were at judging that. Maybe it's a summer conference. Anyway, I literally, over the course of the days we were together at a conference, sat down with every voting member and explained why this was important. And frankly, I think some of the large news organizations were, they had the most to lose, because if they're competing against ESPN.com, ESPN.com's, they are built for web, whereas the newspaper organizations were not so much at that time. And probably still, you could argue, are not built for web, for digital, the way that website only news organizations were. And it was very contentious, and it was a close vote. And I got it through. And it was, it was also an entertaining debate. There were a lot of thoughts on all sides of it. And in some cases, I was just old-fashioned politics of, I'm asking you to do this because it's the right thing, even though it's not in your organization's best interest. It's in our organization's best interest. It's in APSE's best interest. Why should these people join if we won't let them enter the one category they're most qualified to compete in? And I prevailed, or APSE prevailed the issue that I put forth prevailed, and I think the organization's better and stronger for it. And I think that's also helped a lot with I think without that there will probably be some website only, digital only organizations that might not really be as keen to be a part of us because they wouldn't feel like full members. So those are two things I can think of. And the other thing is president, and I think every president, of course, you end up when you're second vice president, you run the contest. I don't think it was my idea. I think it was Mary Burns' idea, but who preceded me directly as president. But we started with the offsite judging, and the first year that came in, I ended up handling. So we had some judges in person and some judges remote, and I ended up trying to handle both. And I think the best decision I ever made was telling everybody after that, don't do it that way. Let somebody handle the remote judging while you're handling the on-site judging, because you would get emails that you would get busy with what's going on in front of you and have to answer them 8 hours later, which is holding up a judging group. I mean, the contest ran well, but it could have run more smoothly if I had the foresight to say, you're going to be in charge of tabulating and communicating with the judging groups that aren't here in person, instead of me trying to do all of it. So there are other things that come up as every president, I think, has dealt with in one way or another, where there are access issues, or we had a large news organization that got into a problem where one of their people was kicked out of a press box by an NFL team. And I intervened in that. And many of these you've never heard about, because the news organization will rather than often be handled privately than to light a fire to it and make it a public firestorm. It may get to that point, but you hope to resolve it without that, which means, as president, we've got advisors who are on the legal side of this. John Sherpa and Gerry Ahern chair a committee that kind of heads that up. So you talk to them. And then I ended up talking to of course, I talked to the sports editor who was involved, tried to get all the information there, tried to talk to the team. They didn't want to talk to me, so I talked to the NFL. And there was a guy, a vice president or whatever, that they had brought in, who had been, and I cannot remember his name. I should have looked this up before we did this, but he had been the chief of staff of the White House for Bill Clinton. And he was the guy they brought in basically to handle a crisis manager, to handle when the Monica Lewinsky scandal happened. And you could tell right away when I talked to this guy that he was really smooth. You liked him right away, and you knew that's why he had gotten that job. And we talked for more than an hour about this, and it was resolved favorably. So that I don't think they ever got an apology, which is probably what they were due and what they wanted, but it was resolved in a better way than it might have been otherwise, through diplomacy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because there were people in that I won't name this because it hasn't been made public, but there were people in that news organization's structure, like at the publisher, higher editor level, like executive editor, that wanted to go to war publicly. And the sports editor said, why don't we see if we can resolve this, rather than, if we can resolve this without a fight, it would be better. But if we have to, we can always do that. And they didn't have to.
One thing you've also introduced to APSE is Thai Night. How did that get going? And
for those of you who are not familiar, it's not TIE. It's not that you have to wear a bow tie or a tie or even a string tie. It's Thai food from Thailand, a cuisine. So there is a story behind that. The 2014, I believe it was, summer conference was in Arlington, Virginia, which I'm gonna interrupt myself and tell a little side story. So that's Washington, D.C., basically. Yeah. And I was able to line up, with the help of a guy named Elton Hayes, John McCain, who had run for president, as our keynote speaker at that luncheon. I was pretty proud of that. and I got to be his greeter and guide to like take him up and back and everything. And Elton was a junior speechwriter for him, and Elton wanted to get in our business and had done some stringing for me and some other people as a freelancer. And I ended up helping Elton get a job in Meridian, Mississippi, and now he covers Penn State for CNHI. So that's how this organization kind of works. But I reached out to Elton about it, and he talked to John, and they said, let's see the schedule. And eventually that happened. So anyway, so this is how Thai Night happened. First of all, I love Thai food. I would say at one point, I would say it's my favorite ethnic food. I think now it's just my favorite food, right? So when I'm traveling, I always try to find a Thai restaurant anyway. So maybe 4 blocks or 3 blocks away from us, there was a street, and it's a really neat street that just had one different kind of ethnic food restaurant after another. It was like literally Ethiopian, Vietnamese, Thai, Mexican, you name it. That's like what existed on this street. It was zoned for restaurants, and it became like international cuisine street. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go to this Thai place if I can. So what usually happens and happened at these conferences, and I don't think this has radically changed, but a lot of the people from the larger news organizations are on budgets that can afford them to get Ubers or taxis and go to expensive steakhouses and things like that. And a lot of people like me from smaller news organizations, as I was at that time, were on their own dime. You know, maybe we got some help getting there, maybe we got help with the room, but we're not probably going to be able to expense a Ruth's Chris steak or a Morton's or something like that, right? So I said, well, there's a bunch of people here from small news organizations, as there have been at other APSE functions. Maybe we can get together. So I basically put out the word, hey, anybody that wants to go have Thai with me tonight, and I went to every small news organization person there. It's a short walk. Let's just walk down here and have Thai. And I think we had 14 at the first one. And it was pretty popular. And then I just started doing it every year, and then started announcing it, and more people came in. It started to become much more now. It's not small news organizations only. It's almost everybody. Like at winter judging in Orlando last year, I think we had 35 people. I think that was the record. Maybe it was 36. And it was basically everybody, right? But one of the things I've done at that, and we've done it at summer conference every year since 2014, and at winter conference more recent. Probably started one year when we were in St. Pete, because they got a great Thai restaurant. They literally shut it down one night when we showed up and said, you're taking, we took up all their space indoors and out. And they said, we're just serving you guys tonight. And they literally turned the open sign off and served only our group, because we had about 30 people there. So it's probably my greatest contribution to sports journalism is creation of Thai Night. And I don't know if that, I think it will be around a lot longer than I am. I sure hope so. But it's a neat chance to go out and sit with the, in a group setting and, talk, but I always go around the room, and Eric, next time I'm going to tab you. But especially to people at the larger news organizations who I know can afford it, and say, you're getting an appetizer. You're getting an appetizer. You're not just for yourself, but to share, appetizers are shareable, so that there's enough appetizers floating around. And I mean, it kind of started because I think I had been out to a steakhouse at a conference. It might have been a judging conference once, and a small news organization guy came and he ordered the salad because that's all he could have afforded. Yeah. And you kind of like, that shouldn't be like that. So Thai Night is a big part of APSE culture, I think now. It's a thing. I generally head it up and do the calling around, but now, like when we had our last conference this past summer conference in Indianapolis, I told Malcolm Moran, who was kind of our own site guy with IUPUI, I said, we're not coming to Indianapolis unless you can find a Thai restaurant. And he went out and scouted and found us one that we could get to that wasn't far away. We try to do it within walking distance when we can, but that's not always possible. But even then, I try to tab the people from the larger news organizations that can afford it and say, why don't you get an Uber and let people pile in with you, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, we just got a couple minutes left.
So selfishly, it's because I get Thai food.
Yeah.
But I think it's also to bring people together in a way
Absolutely.
that maybe they hadn't quite been brought together that way before.
Yeah. We only got a couple minutes left, but do you want to say some things about what APSE has meant to you both professionally and personally?
Yeah. Personally, I've made some of the best friends, not only in the industry that I have, but some of the best. You're my friend, and I've known you for quite a while. I wouldn't have known you if not for APSE. Yeah. And, how many times have we broken bread and had cups of coffee and everything like that has nothing to even do with the job. So I've met many valuable friends and I have learned so much. I would just get on at that time Facebook or on the phone and after a conference and like see stories I liked or projects I liked and ring up the sports editor and say, all right, I want you to take me start to finish on how you did this. I mean, I remember calling, Tuscaloosa News is this and the Boston Globe is this, but they cover the Patriots, which were pretty good at football. And we in Tuscaloosa covered Alabama, which was pretty good at football, right? So I said, I'd like to see what your Sunday and Saturday editions look like. Can you send me those? And we took an idea and we adapted it. We couldn't do it on the scale they did. They had illustrators and things helping with theirs, and we didn't have that depth to do that and turn that like on a game day. But we took ideas from that, and my motto was always, they invent it and we'll perfect it, so to speak. And by which I meant adapt it to our size and ability to do it. So I've never had a good idea in my life, probably, but I've stolen thousands of them. APSE taught me what great sports journalism is, what it looks like. What it's like in sort of an intellectual way, but when you read stories and you're judging, especially, and then when you have the conversations around judging, not just with your group, but when you're talking about, hey, this was this really neat story, idea. I never thought of that. I got to take that back with me. And when you have these conversations, it's important to really be plugged into the organization, to me. And then, Michael Anastasi ended up being the boss of the Tennessean, not the sports editor. And I got hired there. And I don't think that hurt. I don't think he hired me just because I went to Salt Lake and he gave me a ride. Yeah. But there was familiarity there. So there's certainly, making contacts and doing networking. There's getting ideas. There's stealing ideas. There's bending ears and saying, hey, how did you guys do this? Those are all invaluable things. I wouldn't be in the position I am without APSE.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Tommy. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all that you've done for APSE.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric, for doing this. And look forward to seeing you at Thai Night.
All right. Sounds great. Bye.